How's it going, everyone? Connor here with Caliber Whips, and today I'm going to be doing an in-depth tutorial on the lightning rod bullwhip. But first, if you guys are new, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well as follow me on Instagram. That link is in the description down below. Also, the 2019 Los Angeles Whip Cracking Convention is right around the corner, so if you guys are interested in going, I'll put a link in the description for the Facebook page. I highly recommend going, you guys. It really is an awesome convention. But there's a video by Nick Schrader on that, so I'll put a link in the description for that one as well. So what is the lightning rod bullwhip? For those of you who don't know, it is a short bullwhip with a long handle. I actually designed it to be a fast action target whip. The long handle helps with control, and the short thong allows you for more accuracy. So this whip is built for speed and accuracy. So without further ado, let's get started and show you guys how to make the lightning rod bullwhip. So for the core, we're going to use 3/16 inch spring steel rod. You're going to want to cut a 12-inch section. I accidentally cut an 11-inch section, but the reason why I say cut a 12-inch section is so after you attach your strands, you can cut that off so it's more flush, so you can attach your Turk's knot foundation onto that. But the way in which I attach my strands, I actually don't need to do that because like I said, the way in which I attach my strands, here's a belly of a whip that I did. You can see how it's pretty much flush to begin with, so I can just attach the Turk's knot foundation right onto that without any problems. But if you're one of those people that attaches it on a different method where you have to cut it off, like I said, cut a 12-inch section. Alright, so that being said, we have the handle. Now for the core material, this is 550 parachute cord that can fit BBs. If you're wondering if it can fit BBs or not, see if you can fit it over the steel rod. See that right there? If you can fit your parachute cord over the steel rod, it can fit BBs and you're good to go. So, because I'm going to get people who are going to say, my parachute cord doesn't do that. Well, find a piece of parachute cord that does. Find a brand, because different brands are different. I find that the made in China brands are much more likely to fit BBs because they're cheaper made, they're loosely woven, so they'll be more likely to fit BBs and fit over 3/16 inch spring steel rod. So for this, what I'll do is I'll take this, my little torch, gently melt that, and then this will be our funnel to fit BBs in. Then we'll take the other side and we'll fit it over the steel rod like so. Take it again and torch it. This time a bit more. So we torch it a bit longer. Now what we're going to do is take our super glue, and I'll actually squeeze super glue right into this parachute cord funnel that we made. So as you can see there, I squeezed a little bit of glue, and now we have to work quickly. Alright, now we're on the clock because we have a big glob of glue down there at the core, and now I'm going to stick a couple of BBs in here, about 4. And the reason for this is because it's going to stick to the glue. You guys can see right there where the glue squished out of the strands. That is what we're looking for, because what's going to happen is that glue is going to solidify and it's going to fuse the BB with this steel rod, and it's going to create an even more secure structure, or more kind of a fused foundation, if you will, for the parachute cord and the transition area. So we don't have to worry about the transition area breaking down over time. So with that, I'll kind of blow the edge of the glue to kind of get it to kind of spread out. And with that, I'll just kind of leave it be. Let me see if I can move the camera just a tad bit, because I don't want to set it on the bench, on the workbench with all this glue, because I'll never get it off again. So we have our BBs, and what I'm pretty much going to do now from this point forward is fill up this parachute cord until we have 3 inches of BBs. So literally what I'm going to do is just feed them in a few at a time, not one at a time, because I think I can fit up to 4 BBs in here where I can slide them in. So we have 2 now, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 BBs right there. And I'm sliding it down the length of the core. And I'm going to keep on doing that until 3 inches are up, which literally won't be long. By the time I'm done rambling on, I'll pretty much have 3 inches complete. And the reason why we're doing this, some people may be wondering, well, why don't you just have no shot whatsoever? Well, I just feel a bit more comfortable. Oop, I got glue on the table. The reason why I put shot in this whip anyways, because it is going to be a lighter whip, the reason why I put shot in it is because I want the weight of the steel rod to kind of transition into the thong a little bit. Now, if we were using something like an aluminum handle, maybe not. Or if you're using a graphite handle, if you can get your hands on graphite, then you can definitely opt out the shot load. But since we have a solid piece of steel right here, I just feel more comfortable letting the whip balance out a bit more just by adding a little bit of shot load to help that weight kind of transfer into the thong just a little bit. So actually, we were over. Yeah, I put in extra BBs. No worries. About right there. So there we go. Got more glue on the table. I'll just wipe it off. Okay. Yep. That's pretty much it. I'm about like a BB over, but who cares? One BB isn't going to make any difference in the long run. It's like dropping a strand an inch past where you intended it. It's not going to make any difference in the world. So to seal it off, I'll just nuke it with my torch a little bit. So that's not going to go anywhere. So now what we're going to do is wrap the core and actually put binding on this core. And I'll show you what that entails. Okay, so we have our core in the vise. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to bind the core. And this is something that I do often with all the cores of my whips is I'll put some of this hockey tape on there. And if you're wondering what brand I use, it's called Jaybird and Maze. It's made in USA. It's a cotton material. It's really good. I really love it. And it protects the transition area, and it also protects the BBs from moisture as well as the steel rod. So what we're going to do here is we're going to find the area where the BBs stop. We're going to take our tape, put it just a little bit past. So the BBs stop there, we put the tape right past it. Because what this is going to do is help it to taper a little bit better as far as the binding goes. And now what we're going to do is just wrap it up the whole length of the core. And this also helps the parachute cord to grip onto the smooth steel rod. Okay, so just going to wrap it up. And then we're going to use one more material, my secret weapon of binding, which I have never ever disclosed yet on this channel. So you guys are going to get a piece of info, one of my trade secrets of whip making. Okay, now that we have the tape on the core, I'm going to introduce you to my secret weapon of binding, bidirectional filament tape. Now some of you guys are thinking, what do you mean tape? You're using tape? It's not electrical tape, so don't worry. This stuff right here, let me cut you a section. It is insanely strong. It is pretty much like a plastic material. And see these lines, see this grid? That's fiberglass. This stuff is insanely strong. It does not wear, it does not tear. You can't tear this stuff. You have to cut it. As a matter of fact, it's so strong, I have this little piece of leather as a pull tab, because if I lean it up against this itself, it's going to be a nightmare to unstick. So what I'm going to do here is literally just a tad bit. Wrap it tightly. And this is a killer for binding material. Now, I rarely put this stuff on bellies because it will stop wax. Wax has no chance on earth of passing through. See, even a razor blade has a hard time getting through it. Either that or I need to change out my blade. Okay, we're not done yet. We're going to cut one more section. Put my little pull tab right there. Now this, let's see if you guys can see what's on the inside. It's called double bond. If you go to Amazon and type in bidirectional filament tape, you will find this stuff. Make sure it's this thin, because they come in like that wide, and that's going to be a nightmare to try to wrap. So make sure it's about this thin, and make sure it's bidirectional. What that means is the lines go horizontal and vertical. I'm at a loss for words right now. It's pathetic. Anyways, there we go. Put a little bit on the transition. Now this bad boy isn't going anywhere. As you guys can see, as I'm pulling it, it's forming kind of a nice little curl. that's what we're looking for. Now what we're going to do is roll the core. That's right, we do roll this because it helps distribute the tension. And then what we're going to do is attach the first belly onto this core. Okay, so what I have here, I have glued 3 strands of parachute cord. 2 of them are 10 feet long. You guys can see right here. 2 are 10 feet, and the other one is 6.5 feet. And for the 6.5 foot, I staggered it about 6 inches apart. So you have the 2 strands. One is about 6 inches from the other, as opposed to the 2 10-footers. They're found exactly in the middle. So I've glued them at the centers, and this one is the center where it's staggered 6 inches apart. Now what I'm going to do, since I'm plaiting backwards, what I'm actually going to be doing is I'm going to be going basically under 1 over 2. I mean, under 2 over 1. But it's going to kind of look off at first because I'm plaiting backwards. So I'm just kind of doing that. Okay, so you guys can see what I'm doing. So we have these 3 strands right here. I'm going under 2 over 1 for one side, and for the other side I'm going under 1 over 2. Because if you do it the other way, under 1 over 1, I mean under 2 over 1, what you're basically going to be doing is it's going to be off, where the bottom is a bit more loose than the top. If you've ever done 6-plat, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but otherwise, you're going to want to do this right here. The tension is evenly spread out. So let me really quick move the camera for you guys. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go on this side, do under 2 over 1, and on the other side, do under 1 over 2. And you're going to want to keep on doing this until the 6.5 foot strand starts to get shorter. And I'll show you what that looks like. What I do when I drop strands for bellies. So briefly, I just wanted to let you guys know that we're going to be using the 6-plat. We're going to be braiding that past the hockey tape. But on here, I actually marked 20 inches from the core. So this is 20 inches long. This is the 20-inch mark. That's where the first belly is going to end. Sometimes I do that because some whip makers, when they make nylon whips, they just end it when the strands get short. I actually mark the actual length when the 4-plat ends, and then I'll taper the strands from there. But measure 11 inches, you know, you have the handle, or 12 inches, and then start from where the thong begins, and then measure that 20 inches. That's what you're going to want to use. That's what you're going to want to do. Because with this right here, what this will allow you to do is it will also help you to make a better taper. Because what we're going to do is we're going to continue this 6-plat on this empty stranded parachute cord. And we're going to kind of mentally figure out, you guys can see the end right there. We can kind of mentally figure out how it's going to taper. We can evenly space out the 2 strands that are going to be dropped. All right, and that's pretty much what I'm going to show you guys, and I thought I'd mention that. Anyways, moving on. So the method for dropping strands on bellies of whips is I basically neglect the strand, and I'll show you basically what that entails. The strand is getting short, and we're approaching our 20-inch mark right there. So, and I've spaced it out. I've already done it with this strand where I just abandoned it as I was plaiting. So literally now what I'm going to do is, so for this strand right here, my next one, I should use this strand for my next under-over sequence, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave them alone, and I'm going to use the next strand. Basically, if you guys have made whips before, this should be a very, very easy thing to do. Literally just abandon the strand. And you're probably thinking, well, don't you have now this nasty strand in the way? Well, yes, I do. But now what I'm going to do, now that I have these strands out of the way, I'm going to get one of my favorite tools in whip making, hemostats, and I'm going to get another pair really quick. I'm going to use it as pliers. I'm pretty much going to pull this like that. Now what I'm going to do is grab some snippers, just like that. Leave a little bit kind of sticking out like that. You guys see that? Now what I'm going to do is use that extra little bit as a kind of a medium to melt it for. What kind of sentence was that? I ended it with a preposition. So what I'm going to do is kind of fray this out a little bit like that. And then try to see if you guys can see it a little bit better. And then see if I can torch it without torching my hand. There we go. Just like that. Now what I'm going to do is kind of line it up in the vise, line up the platting so it's nice and straight down. And I'm going to continue platting this whip all the way down to the 20-inch mark. And then I'll show you what to do once we get there. So we've reached the 20-inch mark, and I'm going to take my spool of thread. What I'm going to do is pretty much tie this off with a piece of thread. While it's still attached to the, it will still remain attached to the spool because we're going to use the spool to kind of wrap up the strands once we're done snipping them down to size. And what I mean by that is instead of just ending the belly by cutting all the strands at the exact same location, what I'm going to do is stagger them 2 inches apart. So right now I'm just tying this through very tight. Try not to do too much of a tight spot right there, because if you wrap up like this whole inch section with really tight thread, what you're going to end up doing is creating a kink in that spot of the whip. So now what I'm going to do is take my torch, throw that away. Now I can undo my hemostats, kind of undo that a little bit. Now, since we're going to stagger each strand by 2 inches, that's literally what I'm going to do. Measure each strand 2 inches apart from each other, snip it at a diagonal angle, gently hit it with my torch so it doesn't fray. Boom, we are done with that one. Then we're going to measure the next one off of the one we just cut. So even though it says stagger 2 inches, strand number 2 is going to be 4 inches from here. Strand number 3 is going to be 6 inches. Strand number 4 is going to be 8 inches from the spot in which we tied it off. Alright, perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to lightly wrap this entire ended section with the thread. We're not going to do it too tight because we don't want it to create a kink, but we're just going to lightly wrap it up. Now make sure all the strands are lined up as straight as possible. You see that? Because if they kind of overlap, it's going to kind of form an uneven surface for the next belly. Actually, for the overlay, because there is no other belly. This is the only belly on this whip. But it's going to make an uneven surface. So as you guys can see, it's laying down very straight, and that's what we're looking for. We're just going to gently wrap, and we're not going to go back either. We're just going to go up front and leave it there. Don't worry if you're thinking that maybe the spiraling is going to form uneven tension. The only purpose of this spiraling is to hold the strands. This isn't acting as binding of any kind. It's just keeping everything in order and straight for when we attach the overlay. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to keep spiraling about an inch or two past the last strand, because what's going to happen is it's going to form a crease when we put the overlay on, just so we can continue that tension. I'm just going to gently lift it up, lift up the loop right there. I don't know if you guys can see any of what I'm doing, but there we go. Since it's going to come loose if I'm not careful, I'm just going to cinch it. There we go. Now to kind of give it a quick roll myself, even though we are going to roll the belly again. There we go. It has formed a nice tapering transition from the belly strands to the core strands. As I move it slowly, you guys can see how it tapers, and if I move it fast, you guys can see how it tapers. So now what we're going to do is roll this belly and attach the binding that we have for this belly. Okay, so to bind this belly, I actually have a binding schematic, but it's probably too complicated and too poorly written for you guys to understand what's going on, so I'm going to kind of break it down as I'm doing it. So for this belly, I've actually divided it on the schematic. I've divided this belly into sections, like the 1/2 foot, the 3/4, the 1/4 section, because since this belly from here all the way to here, it's 20 inches. So at the 10-inch mark, the halfway point, we're actually going to put a layer of monofilament tape. So what I'm going to do quickly right here is kind of loop it over. Okay, so that's the halfway point. What I'm going to do is hit it with the fiberglass tape. Now, like I said, I rarely do this on bellies, but since I designed this whip not to be waxed, most of the binding, if not all of it, on this whip is pretty much tape, which it's not electrical tape, so it won't degrade. You don't have to worry about that. But you definitely can wax these whips if you want to. It just won't get to the core. Okay, so, and I also have it marked at the 1/4 area. So about right there. You guys are going to have to excuse my arm in the way. And make sure you do it tight. Okay, that's about good. That's about the 1/4 mark. That's about 5 inches on the thong of the whip. There we go. So, as you guys can see there, we have kind of a nice curl forming. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I can. So now what we're going to do is at the 1/8 mark, which is in between the 1/4, which is here, we're going to put hockey tape. And we're going to go all the way down to the handle. And what this is going to do is kind of thicken up the area where we're going to put the strands on the overlay. This is going to thicken up the handle for us. Take this little tab thing, snip that off. And we're going to do it again. But this time, actually I should have left that tab thing on, but nah, doesn't matter. We're going to go back down because we're going to go back up and end it at 3/8 point. So it's in between the 1/2 mark and the 1/4 mark. So it's past this, in between this, so right there. Like I said, the binding schematics that I make for these whips are a bit complicated, and some whip makers argue that you shouldn't put too much time into the binding. And that was one of the things that I did, especially in my earlier days. Put a lot of focus on the binding of all my whips. Okay. And basically the purpose of this tape also helps it to taper. Because as you could tell if you've already made this whip so far, there's not a lot of taper in the belly. That's what the tape is for. Okay, now what we're going to do is do one more layer of tape. This time way past the 1/2 mark. I'm actually going to throw this away. I'm almost out. Get another smaller spool of it. Another roll of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go about right here. I don't know if you guys could see that, but on the schematic, I believe it is at the 3/4 way mark. So about right there. And we're going to go all the way down to the end of the handle. So we're going to have about that much of the actual belly exposed.
Actually, I'm going to move it just a tad bit. About right there. I think that's good. About 3/4 of the length of the belly. Okay, and this tape is nice and tight too. Okay, so as I'm looking this over, it says on the schematic I should put some artificial sinew about right there and spiral it down. So kind of start here, go up, spiral it down, go back. But as I'm looking at it, I don't think it really needs that. It's looking pretty good the way it is. As you guys can see, it's got a nice little curl forming. Now again, this is not something that a lot of people were expecting, a lot of tape in the binding of this whip. Again, this is not electrical tape. This is hockey tape, which is a great material, which won't really degrade like you think, and fiberglass tape, which again will not degrade as some people might think. Now here's the thing, this whip is not designed to be waxed, so obviously if you do wax it, it's okay, as I've said before, but this whip was designed to be springy, short, and light. So what you see is kind of what I engineered it to be. So the Ocean Man whip that you saw me have, that's pretty much exactly how it's made, and it's a very lightweight, fast action whip, and it has plenty of this binding right here to give it volume, because artificial sinew lays flat. And you're going to have to use a lot of artificial sinew to make it thicken up, and by the time you make it thick, it's going to be like a piece of steel rod with all the sinew you put on it. So this right here is a very good material for what we're using it for. Now again, as I said before, you can wax this, and I'm most likely going to do that when I'm done with this whip. I'm probably going to wax it. But for those of you out there who are just concerned that I use so much tape, again, I only use this much tape on the lightning rods. The classic indies that I've made, the pearl whips that I'm making, and other whips such as that do not have this much tape in the bellies. Alright, only the core is similarly prepped to how this is. So anyways, let's move on and start by attaching the overlay.
So one thing I wanted to bring to your guys' attention, aside from the fact that this whip has a great natural curl to it because of the hockey tape and the fiberglass tape, but this black core strand that we had in the beginning of the video, you want to cut that at the 3.5 foot mark. So as you guys can see, I don't know if you guys can see against the back of my hand here, but you guys can probably see how it's pointed. What we're going to do is build the English eye. If you guys have seen my video on making an English eye or implementing an English eye to your whip, that's what you're going to want to be doing for this. So I'm going to kind of breeze over that, but I am going to show you how I go from 4 plat to 6 plat. Actually 4 plat to 5 plat, then 6 plat. But I wanted to bring that to your guys' attention because I haven't said that yet so far in the video. But you want to cut your core strand to the 3.5 foot mark. So you basically know how long the whip is going to be. The finished product is going to have a 3.5 foot long thong, but you want to cut this at the 3.5 foot mark. So cut that at the 3.5 foot mark, make your English eye, plat that over your core strand, and then continue on for about maybe 6 inches. And then we're going to add our extra strand to bump it up to 5 plat. And I'll show you how that looks right now.
Okay, so we have about 6 inches done on the whip. Now you may notice the English eye is very tiny on this one. That's because we're going to be using a Winrich style taper twisted fall for this, and I'll get into that later on in the video. So for now what we're going to do is bump it up from 4 plat to 5 plat. What I've done here is I've grabbed a strand, I've gutted it, and I've tapered it where, I cut it at a slant and then singed it. And you may be wondering how long to make it. Well, what I'll do is I'll take it, I'll line it up with this, and I'll run it along the length of the other strands. So for example, there you go, that's all 3. So it's exactly the same length as these strands. Now you may be wondering how long these strands are. Well, these are 2 15-foot strands that are found at the halfway point. So that's what I've gone ahead and did, was I've taken 2 15-foot strands and I've found the halfway point and made my English eye. And as I've said, I have a video on English eyes. So check it out if you haven't already. Okay, and you may be wondering what are the other strand lengths?
I don't have any written down because I only have made these with English eyes. Okay, so the way I like to do this is I've actually marked points where I'm going to incorporate the Plat actually into the braiding, because what we're going to do is, since this is very thin already, what we're going to do is add this strand to make a taper, make a better taper. So I don't know if I've covered this in my English eye video. I don't know if this concept has been done in that video, so this may be totally new to you guys. So what I'm going to do is put a bead of super glue about right there, and I'm going to take my strand that's tapered and I'm going to put it up against the core, grab my hemostats, and cinch it. Not cinch it, but clamp it. And now what we're going to do is this golden strand right here, the 5th Plat, is actually going to be part of the core until we get to here, which, if you guys are wondering how far it is from the tip or the English eye, it's about 7.5 inches. And I'm measuring exactly with the English eye. So that should be enough time for that glue to dry, or dry enough where it shouldn't fall off. And what we're going to do is tightly braid over it, just like this. So what I'm going to do now is just braid until I get to this dot right here. Do you guys see that dot? I'm going to braid till I get there. So I'm going to braid this with this strand in the core, and I'll show you guys how I kind of incorporate this strand back into the overlay. Alright, so what I've reached is that dot that we were talking about. Now, instead of just pulling it over to the side and start plaiting with it in, what we're going to do is inject the 6th Plat strand right underneath it, and then pull over into the 5 Plat. And the reason for that is that, how many strands do we have in the core? 2. When we bump to 5 Plat, how many strands do we have now? 1. And what that's going to do is make an uneven taper, and it's actually going to decrease the thickness of our whip. And we do not want that under any circumstance. Nowhere in whip making should the whip increase or decrease in taper when it should be doing the opposite. That is absolutely horrible, and that should never happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to lean it over to one side, but directly under it, we're going to get our super glue, and we're going to inject the 6 Plat strand, just so we maintain that core thickness. But once we reach the other strands down here, then that's a different story. Now, this may be a bit complicated for some of you newer whip makers. So if you guys want a more friendlier tutorial, you can check out my video, how to make a Paracord Bullwhip fast, cheap, and easy. Or you can check out most of the tutorials Nick Schrader has. He's very good and very thorough in the way he does his videos, so he's very easy to understand. So definitely check him out if you guys haven't already. Most likely, if you're watching this, you've already heard of Nick Schrader, so I'm telling you guys nothing new. So now what we're going to do is we have to figure out which do we go, under 1 over 2 or under 2 over 1. So what I'm going to do, whoops, I actually took off the core strand. What we're actually going to do is we're actually going to go under 2 over 1. Now you may notice we have a double gap forming where a strand should be going under. That's okay, because what this is going to do is make it a heck of a lot easier for us when we go to drop or add strands. I gotta get my glue again because I accidentally ripped it off. Right about there. Perfect. Let me get my hemostats once again. Clamp that closed. Okay, so now what we're going to do is figure out which strand to pull. Now, if you pull the wrong strand, you could accidentally rip out the English eye strand, or you could damage it. So what I'm going to do is do a gentle pull. Okay, so that's part of the overlay. This is part of the core. We're going to grab our core strand. Now, it doesn't really matter. Whichever one won't form a big ugly gap is the one you want to use. So now we're going to go under 2/1, just like that. And now I'm just looking at the back, and I'm going to pull nice and tight. Now make sure you don't forget which one is the core strand and accidentally incorporate that into your overlay. Okay, so this one at a time, adding strands, is probably the only time we're going to be doing this. For the rest of the whip, we're going to be adding both strands at a time. So for example, when we go from 10 plat to 12 plat, we're going to be adding both strands at a time for that. And for the ease of this video, even though I have a video on incorporating English eyes, I'll probably quickly go over how I do the 12 to 14 plat or the 10 to 12 plat. I don't know which one yet, so what I'm just going to do is just keep on platting. Now, one thing I like to do to make it a bit easier for me and the cosmetic benefits of the whip is, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a minute crease. A little itty bitty crease. You guys can't even see it on the camera, but I can. I'm actually going to smash that in the vise. And what that's going to do is straighten up everything underneath the overlay. Kind of make everything, kind of force everything to get along, so by the time you're done with the whip, everything looks nice and clean and sharp. So I'm going to keep on plaiting until I get to that. And I'll show you guys what I'm going to do to go from 5 plat to 6 plat. Because there is something I do differently with 6 plat that most whip makers don't do. And I'll show you guys what that is. Okay, so we're ready to add the 6 plat into the overlay. We've reached that section that I was talking about. And if you guys are wondering how far it is from the English eye, 11 inches exactly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, again, add another strand that's exactly as long from here all the way down to the tips of the strands. But we're not going to incorporate it right away because, we're going to incorporate this strand a bit further down than as opposed to the other two that we just did. The other two we probably plaited an inch or so, actually maybe 2 or 3, but this one we're probably going to do a bit more than that, maybe about 8 inches. So now what I'm going to do is just take that core strand that we have, move it over to the side. Now you may be wondering, which direction do I go? Do I now go under 2/1? Nope, we're going to go under 1/2. And you may be wondering, well, wait a minute, it's uneven on both sides now. Exactly. Because if you guys have made whips before, the 6 plat is very weird with parachute cord. And I find it easier to plat the 6 plat when you go under 2/1 on one side and then under 1/2 on the other side. So if you notice, we go under 1/2. And it just makes everything even out on all sides. So take our core strand, make sure we don't forget which one that is. So we went under 2/1. Now we're going to go under 1/2. Because I find the 6 plat, it's kind of loose at the bottom and tight at the top, and it's kind of uneven. Like the top strands are look like diamond plat, and the bottom strands look like herringbone. It's weird. So what I'm just going to keep on doing is I'm just going to keep on plaiting until I get somewhere down here. And then I'm going to add both the other strand. I'm going to incorporate this strand and a second strand at the same time to bump it up to 8 plat instantly. We're not going to go from 6 to 7 plat. We're going to go from 6 to 8 plat right off the bat. Poet and don't know it. Even my feet, they show it. Well, you can't even see my feet, but I'm wearing Longfellows. Anyways, that was something stupid. Okay, I'm just going to keep on plaiting, and I'll show you guys probably how I incorporate 2 strands at the exact same time. Okay, so I've reached the point where I'm going to inject 2 strands at the same time. Now what I did to do this was I cut the strands at a diagonal, and then I singed the tips together with like a torch, and now they're stuck together so they don't fall apart and get in the way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my super glue, and I'm going to put it right about there, just under there, and then I'm going to quickly add it in and then Plat. So what I'm going to do now is just push that in, just hold it there for a few seconds, and now what I'm going to do is move both strands to the side, because you don't want gaps to form, because this is an easy spot for a gap to form in the top of the plaiting. So I'm just going to do, there we go, just like that. So now make sure the glue is off of my fingertips, and now I'm going to start plaiting. Just go through, pull everything tight. Okay, so now what I'm going to do here is take my strands, gently pull them out to the side, and find out where they stick out the best. So for example, right here, they don't pull out so well, so I'm going to do it right here, just like that. So now that looks good. Over here I'm going to do the same thing. That looks good too. So I'm going to take this strand, pull it all the way around the back, go under 3, over 3, and then continue that sequence down for the rest of the length of the whip. So there we go. And I'll get back with you guys when I am done with the overlay, because I'm going to add the next thing I'm going to add is the accent color. If you guys have seen all my lightning rod bullwhips, they all have an accent color. That's what I'm going to add later on during the length of the whip. So now I'm just going to keep on plaiting, and I'll get back with you guys when the overlay is complete. Alright, so the whip is almost complete. As you guys can see here, all I have to do is attach a Turk's knot. But I did do the transition knot, and it is a Spanish ring. Turned out really nice. Also, as well as the plating and the taper. Turned out really, really good. I attached a fall. It is a Winrich style taper twisted fall. If you guys want a video on that, be sure to check this one out right here. There's a link in the description for it. But I did roll it. I don't know if I talked about that in the video, but I do roll taper twists, whether it's on the fall or the actual thong of the whip. But yeah, I think I'm going to wax this one. I've decided to wax it, even though it looks really good, and the rollout on it is really sharp for a whip that's not waxed. That's definitely what you want. Let's see if you guys can see the loop forming. There's no cracker on it, so it's not going to pop. But you guys can see a little loop forming. That's what you want. So there you guys go. I'm going to wax it. It's going to darken the colors, blend them together, as well as fuse stuff like this Spanish ring. Now this Spanish ring right here is tied on really, really tight, so it's not coming loose, but just the wax will fuse it in place even more. So I'm going to attach the Turk's knot, and we'll be good to go. And I'll get back with you guys when this whip is 100% complete. So here is the finished product. It is waxed, and it turned out really, really nice. I love how the colors blended together, and as you guys may notice by the Turk's knot, it looks a bit off because the blue is 550 cord and the goldenrod is 275 cord. I've seen this done before by several other whip makers, and they beat me to it because I actually had this idea for several months, but actually never got around to doing it. So yeah, also really quick, some of you guys may be wondering on the status of me accepting custom orders, because I said by January I'd be available. I actually got some more information on that, and as far as my order goes, I will not be able to take orders until July of 2019, maybe. So what I mean by that is that I have a lot of academic stuff I have to work on and a lot of stuff I have to do, so this will be my last video until maybe July or August. So I'm going to be gone for a while, you guys, but fear not, I will still be alive. I'm not going to die or anything. So if you guys are new, be sure to subscribe. I will be back sometime in July or August, and I will not be able to take orders until July or August. Hopefully I'll be back and up and running again soon, but I have a lot of stuff going on, so hope you guys can understand. And as always, I'll be seeing you guys in the next video.